We just saw how we can modify an existing Docker file and include updated packages. Now we want to take an existing Docker image and extend it to include additional functionality. Specifically, we want to have our WordPress site work in HTTPS. The default WordPress Docker image does not support HTTPS. If you do not use a reverse proxy, it's easy to enable HTTPS, but in a reverse proxy scenario, we have to build it into the image. The problem is if our Nginx site has SSL on the outside, but internally we still use HTTP, WordPress will not work. So let's go to the settings file and determine why. WordPress uses this URL here for everything. So if we change this to HTTPS and our WordPress container is not using HTTPS, it's not going to work. The first step in changing WordPress to HTTPS is to set it here. We'll set it here and temporarily break our WordPress site until we can include HTTPS on the back end. Save the changes. As soon as we do, our site's going to break because it's going to redirect us to HTTPS. But the only service we have running is chat, so it's going to default to that. Now, if we try to access data on this site, it's going to say it has moved permanently. It's going to try to redirect. It takes a number of steps, but it's pretty easy to do. So let's make a new directory for our Docker file. We'll call it WordPress Docker image. And we'll create our Docker file using touch Docker file, which just creates a blank file is all that does. We don't want to edit it. Instead, we need to generate a self-signed SSL file, self-signed certificates. We can install a package. I might already have it installed, but let's see. Install SSL cert. This will automatically create the certificates for us. It says it's already installed on the latest version. We don't have to do anything. Now we can use the command make SSL cert generate default snake oil. Now these certificates are not valid to use in a modern web browser such as Chrome or Yandex or Edge. It'll look at it and say there's no authentication behind these. We don't know who created them, so we're not going to trust them. But we can use it internally within our own site without a problem. Let's verify that these certificates exist by using the ls command. That's going to say, let's just list this file and this file to verify that they exist, which they do. We need to put these files inside of our image. So we need to copy them to the current directory. We want to maintain the original permissions, such as this for security, so we will use -p. I'll just copy this line there, and it will copy that file to the local directory. And we'll do the same thing with this one as well, the key file. Oops, I need a dot there. Okay, now we can look and we have the two files that we need in our directory. We can now put these inside of our Docker file. So now we can edit our Docker file and add our code that we want. We're using the latest WordPress Apache image. We do not have to rebuild from scratch. We can just take this image and extend it to include SSL. This is the command that we need. This is the command that we have to do during the build process. And then we are also going to copy our self-signed certificates inside of the image, so that when the container runs, it can already have something to use. Now, using volumes in Docker Compose, we can replace these with an authentic certificate that we can use on the web. So let's save and exit. And now we will build this. Let's look at the images that we already have. We already have one called WordPress latest. So we'll call ours something else. Docker build -t. Let's call it SSL WordPress, and we'll call it latest. This is our own. It should build quite quickly. It'll download the new WordPress image. Looks like there was an update that was recently pushed out. It enabled SSL. We have to restart Apache for it to take effect, which we do every time we start a new container. So now we have our new image with SSL built into it. And it's right there. Actually, I don't want this failed build here, so let's remove this to keep our images clean. Now, the next thing we need to do is configure Docker Compose to use this new image. So let's go to our WordPress Docker Compose site. We need to create a new Apache SSL site. This is really the same thing as our Nginx sites. This is an Nginx configuration file that includes SSL. As we can see, it's listening on port 443 and the certificates are listed here. We need to do something very similar, but for Apache. And we need to create a volume, so this configuration file will go inside of the container. When it starts, it will pull in this configuration file. So we will make a new directory, we'll call it Apache, for the configuration files for the volume. And let's just create our siteconf file in it. And now we can edit that, Apache siteconf. I put this code on the website for us to easily copy and paste. Everything is here, it's correct, it works without any modification. Sometimes we have to specify the name here. In this case, it's not going to matter. So we specify a virtual host for all incoming traffic to go to 443. And these are the configuration files that we included in the image. By default, the WordPress image only includes this. We cannot include the SSL unless we enable the SSL module, which we just did. Save and exit. Now we need to modify our Docker Compose file to use the new image, to specify a new volume, and to set the SSL port that we'll use. So we'll just make this SSL WordPress latest. The port, we will use an HTTPS designator, so 208.451.443. I use 8 here, 208, because it's similar to 80, and we'll use 204 because it's similar to 443. Just an easy way for us to keep them distinct. Now we need to create a new volume. Locally on the VPS, we will use our apache site.conf file, but it's going to overwrite this file inside of the running container. It overwrites the default Apache configuration file to include our SSL information. Let's save and exit. Now we can restart Docker Compose down and Docker Compose up -d. We can verify Docker PS, and right there it is, SSL WordPress. It is also listening on port 2451, which then forwards it to 443. So let's verify that WordPress is responding to information on this port. So if we do curl head HTTPS localhost 2451, it's actually going to fail because it's going to say SSL certificate problem. This is a self-signed certificate. If we use the -K, the insecure flag, we can use curl to connect to our site. And we know it works because it says the location is at HTTPS. Redirect by WordPress is the latest version of PHP. The last thing we need to do is change our Nginx config file to also send the forward to the HTTPS port, not to the HTTP port 80. So let's see Nginx sites available, and it was blog. So we'll comment out this. We could replace it as fine as well. So we'll change it to HTTPS and change that to 4. This is the only configuration we need to make in our Nginx site configuration file. Configuration is good. System control, restart Nginx. Now it still isn't going to work. We need to do one more thing. It's still wanting to go to the chat site. This is because our site is still listening on port 80 only, but we're going to a port 443 on the WordPress site. So we need to create an SSL certificate. And it's going to ask us which one we want, and now we can choose 2 for a blog site. I've already done this once before, so it's just asking me if I want to do a new one or reinstall. So we now have successfully installed the SSL certificate. If we refresh this page, it'll now go back to our blog site using SSL.